Alrighty. Good morning, everyone, and welcome to our first Moore Memorial Library Zoom monthly staff book discussion. We meet the first Friday of every month from 9 to 10 a.m., and we have done so for the past decade. We share amongst each other the recent books we've read and give great ideas to one another, as well as that help builds our staff book picks display that's adjacent to the circulation desk. We also issue out monthly our staff picks list, and we rate the books from 5 stars being a wonderful book you shouldn't miss out on, to a 1 star, maybe you shouldn't bother. So joining me today is some of our lovely staff readers, and I'm going to ask each one to introduce themselves before they begin discussing their book selections. I'm going to start this morning with Liz Reed. Liz?
Thanks, Patty. So yes, my name is Liz Reed, and I'm an adult services librarian at the Norwood Library. Usually you see me working at the reference desk on the 2nd floor, and I do a lot of program planning and ordering for the collection, as well as all the reference work that we do in person and over the phone and online. So I have several books to talk about today, and I'm going to cross several different genres, which is kind of how I read. So Patty, let's start with the Jessica Pan book first. So one of the things I do at the library is I lead the Titles on Tap book group, and we have gone virtual now that we're all socially distant. And for April, we read Sorry I'm Late, I Didn't Want to Come, One Introvert's Year of Saying Yes by Jessica Pan. So this is nonfiction. And it's, so as Patty mentioned, we usually give the books a rating on the score of 1 to 5, and I would rate this as a 4, but with a qualification attached to that. So the author is American, and she's married, living in England, and finds herself in a city of 9 million people, and she only talks to one person every day other than her husband, and that's the barista. And so even though she has happily been an introvert for years, she, finds herself in a situation where she's kind of backed herself into a corner and doesn't really have any friends left in the city because everybody's moved away, so on and so forth. And so as a writer, she, is a freelance writer at different journals and magazines and newspapers. She writes for The Guardian, for instance. She decides to see if she can make herself into a happy introvert again by acting like an extrovert. And so it sort of reads like a collection of essays, and she tries different practices that would be scary to her in the past. For instance, just starts randomly talking to strangers. She takes a class to learn how to have more meaningful, connecting conversations, to make friends as an adult in your 30s. She even does stand-up comedy and improv. She travels alone to a foreign country. So it's kind of you're watching her journey through this. Through each section, she talks to a different expert in whatever field she's trying to explore, and has some research, some light research into, statistics. And she's very witty. She's very light writing style. And that's why I'm going to give it a 4, because it is a very accessible book. I think any adult could pick this up and find something there. And this is why I'm qualifying it, is because if you're looking for a book that's a real study about social behavior and introversion versus extroversion, this is not the book for you. It's not, for lack of a better word, very sciencey. It's, a little bit pop sci. If you want a good book about, studying introversion, extroversion, why we are the way we are, I would recommend Quiet, The Power of Introverts in a World That Can't Stop Talking, or anything by Brené Brown, such as Daring Greatly. Those are going to be more for you. But this is a fun little bit of an adventure, although I'll say the book group, as we were talking about it, we're like, oh, she's going to that bar and doing that thing. We can't do that right now. So that was kind of the whole book is, oh, well, we can't try that method that she's talking about. We're gonna have to wait on that one. But all right, so that's my rating for Sorry I'm Late. And Wonder of Wonders, I actually have a couple physical books to talk about. I read The Westing Game by Ellen Raskin. It's actually a children's book from the 1970s. And just a friend recommended it to me, like, oh, that's a classic, you need to read it. So I took it out before the library closed back in March. And it's a lot of fun. It's just a very fun children's fiction book. It's written in chapters. And I think even adults would enjoy it if you just kind of want a little bit of an escape. It reminded me an awful lot of the movie Clue, if you enjoyed Clue. I don't want to give anything away, but it's does a lot with I don't want to say character development because, you know, it's a children's book. There's not a ton of character development in it. It's really plot-based, but it relies a lot on these very unique, very colorful characters moving things along at a very rapid pace dialogue. It's very witty. There's a lot of jokes sprinkled throughout the whole thing, and you're trying to figure out the mystery. All of these apparent strangers who live in the same mysterious apartment complex are all drawn to the mansion on the hill one day because the millionaire has died and they're all part of his will. But they don't just automatically get an inheritance. They have to solve a mystery first. And it goes from there. And, you know, it's a product of its time. It's from the 1970s. It won the Newbery Award, actually. It's not, it's just a very different writing style than I think we're used to in modern day. So it was kind of a fun little nostalgic adventure. So I would recommend The Westing Game, and I would give that 4 stars. And then a little bit of a reread for me. So I've actually already read this once. It's nonfiction. Anybody who knows me is not going to be very surprised that I'm reading a book called Knitting Rules by Stephanie Pearl-McPhee. And this is a 5. Oh my gosh, this is a hands down 5. I'm rereading it because I listened to several knitting podcasts. Shocker, I'm a huge knitter. One of the podcasts I listened to is Unraveling. And they previously went through The Opinionated Knitter by Elizabeth Zimmerman. And now they're going through Knitting Rules chapter by chapter and talking about different parts of it. Stephanie Pearl-McPhee is one of the fastest knitters in the United States. She's incredibly prolific. And she's very, very clever. So the subtitle on this book is The Yarn Harlot Unravels the Mysteries of Swatching, Stashing, Ribbing, and Rolling to Free Your Inner Knitter. If that, doesn't kind of give you an idea of
your inner knitter.
What she reads like.
Wait, is her middle name really Pearl?
Her last name is hyphenated, Pearl-McPhee.
That's appropriate. Knit and Pearl.
Not spelled like that, Pearl.
Oh, okay.
Just to give you a flavor of what the book is. It's, it's an exploration of knitting. It's not exactly a how-to book, although she does get into a couple of basic things for if you're trying to help somebody become a knitter, things that you can have them do. But this is just a taste of her flavor here. So pointing out to non-knitters that as far as dorky habits go, running marathons and keeping a stamp collection are at least as pointless as knitting and don't even keep you warm in winter, won't endear you to them. Furthermore, it doesn't make them think your knitting habit makes any more sense. Stick to your knitting and say nothing about rock collections or racing plastic boats. You can think it though. I would. So she's just very clever and it's very funny. I laugh out loud. I mean, really actually laugh out loud when I'm reading this book. So if you're all crafty or you live with a knitter, this might be a good book for you.
Great, thanks, Liz. Okay, next we're going to have Marge talk about her titles.
Okay. I'm Marge Corjay, and I work in the outreach department, and you'll see me behind the circulation desk. I'm a part-timer there at the library, and I have 2 books to talk about today. The first one is The Time in Between by Maria Duenas. She's from Spain, so this has been translated, and I'm going to say that this is going to be a 5. It was excellent. I went into it saying, okay, another historical mystery, World War II again. We've been there, done that many times. Well, this takes a completely different view of it. It starts shortly after World War I, and it follows a young woman who she is apprenticed with her mother to a seamstress in Madrid, and it follows her life from World War I as she begins to, she's 14 when she's apprenticed. She works for a while, she gets a little older, about 18, she becomes engaged to a nice young man. They're going to get married, and she meets someone in a shop that sort of sweeps her away. He's very debonair and just very handsome. And she breaks her engagement and goes to Morocco with this man. Of course, he's all looks and not exactly the nicest person. He abandons her in Morocco. Years go by. It goes into the Spanish Civil War, and then works its way into the beginnings of World War II. It is more a following of her life during this turbulent time, rather than talking about the war and the atrocities of the basically the three wars, the end of World War I, going into the Spanish Civil War, and then into World War II and the invasion from Germany of Spain during World War II. I really liked it. Being a seamstress myself, I could follow a lot of the things. She sets herself up as a dressmaker. She starts to gather information and pass it along to different groups. It's very fast-paced. It's very, very readable. She's a wonderful writer, absolutely wonderful. She just has a way with words that's unbelievable. And I truly enjoyed it. That's why I say I think I'm gonna have to give it a 5. I went into it saying, this is going to be really boring. I've got a book in my hand. I don't care at this point in time, anything to read. But I really, it's long. It's like 650 pages. So it's sort of a real tome to read. But you don't even notice it. You just want to keep going back and seeing where her life is going and how these people she meets interacts with her and how the world is sort of revolving around her, but not getting into really the atrocities of war or the hardships of war. She does see them, but they're not really focusing on it as much as the people's interaction. So it gives a little different, I think, view of the times, and it mostly takes place in Spain and Morocco, which is a little, you don't usually get Germany, a lot on Germany, but this isn't. So I'd say, yeah, this is a definite 5, and I really enjoyed it. And the other one I have is I Only Have Pies for You. This is a J fiction, borderline YA. The main character is 12 years old. She's living in Texas. She belongs to a family that owns a pie shop in this small town. So she figures, okay, everyone figures, okay, she's going to inherit the pie shop, and she should be able to bake really super pies, because her whole family, her great-grandmother, her grandmother, her mother, all have made these, absolutely fantastic pies for this little town. Excuse me. So it's sort of a silly middle school, like I say, she's 12, she's in middle school, and you have the little pranks and, interactions between children of that age. But I think what probably jarred me, and I'm going to give it a 3, is that there's like love scenes, which a 12-year-old is not usually either going to be interested in. There's kissing sessions, there's slow dancing, and I just somehow found it hard to get into 12-year-olds are really interested or into that much at that age. So, but otherwise it was sort of fun. It was a fun read. You talk about the pie shop and having this stuff in the town and stuff. So yeah, But that I think is only going to have to be a 3 because I thought it was more, the characters were 16-year-olds at that point than 12-year-olds.
Don't you find that there are a lot of
Excuse me.
for that age group that often as adults we read them and we think that some of the topic areas are not suitable? I'm thinking of I can't think of the title when I read one that was meant for, you know, that age group, that 10, 11, 12, and things like divorce and violence and other things. And the kids really are ready for it.
I don't know
Anybody?
if they're not ready for it, but I think maybe it just that they were acting more like 16-year-olds would than like 12-year-olds. 12-year-olds are still sort of giggly and they think the guy is cute, but they're not going to like slow dance with them or get into heavy kissing quite yet. They're interested in it. And if she had made the character like 16, I think it would have been appropriate and I would have said, yeah, this is a good read because it is well written. It's just that 12-year-olds are still, you know, throwing spitballs at each other and doing stuff, you know, doing stuff like that than really getting interested in, I think the guy is really cute and I want to, you know, get close to him and slow dance with him. I'm not sure 12-year-olds, even in this day and age, are really, the average 12-year-old girl is going to be really looking into that much.
I don't know.
I have an
I-
almost 12-year-old and she's not, boys are disgusting.
Yeah.
And so I could see that. Yeah.
I must have, I don't know. I'm just remembering like my 12-year-old days and like how like when I was in like 7th grade, like I feel like it was more like what you were describing, Marge, like in the book, like a lot of beginning dating was like still going on, and like I've heard like a lot of girls having like crushes on guys and vice versa, but who knows, maybe it's like different from region to region.
Maybe, yeah.
Rich, do you have any other titles you'd like to
No, I've been
discuss?
mostly listening to online things on Hoopla, so got
Okay.
one good series going, but that's it.
Yeah, okay, great. Well, next time I'm sure you'll have
Yeah.
some more
Oh, yes.
great picks. Okay, thank you. Lydia, you're up.
Oh, my turn. Okay. I read a book called Empty Mansions by Bill Dedman. And he actually, he wrote it in collaboration with Paul Clark Newell Jr. It's, I don't know if you want to bring it up on screen, Patty. I read it, actually I listened to it as an audiobook. And it is about the heiress, Huguette Clark. And it started because Bill Dedman, he noticed that this mansion was for sale and discovered that it had been unoccupied for decades, and just marveled, especially in New York City, you know, how could, if you click on the book cover there, it'll yeah. So yeah, you can see on the book cover, you can see that that the piece of real estate in New York City, it had 121 rooms. So this is the house that she grew up in, and she died at age 104 and had a $300 million inheritance. But she had basically become a recluse and lived basically in a hospital room for decades, and was very mistrustful of outsiders, and she was just a very interesting character. And so Dedman started researching the family's history, and it starts with this family. It's the family of W.A. Clark, who was a copper baron and had ended up with a level of wealth comparable to Rockefeller back in the days. And so the family ended up with this mansion and the biggest house in New York City, and in addition, mansions in California and Connecticut as well. And he died, and then he had another daughter as well, and she died young, and then his wife passed away eventually, and Huguette had been married just briefly and then got divorced, and she sort of never fully matured. She was very childlike for her entire life. Even as an elderly woman, she was obsessed with dolls. She collected dolls. So the entire fortune was left to her. And the book, I would give it 4 stars. It was really fascinating. At the beginning, I wasn't as into it because he takes a really deep dive into the family's history on W.A. Clark's side of it, and how he accumulated his wealth and his upbringing and everything. And but then once it got into Huguette and her life when she was elderly, and then the circumstances after her death, I was riveted, because she ended up donating. She was a philanthropist. She donated just so much money, but often it was these people who were close to her and some of the people who worked for her, and they would mention that they needed money for something, and she would just fork it over. And people were trying to encourage her to give, to support this hospital in a philanthropic way, or this museum in a philanthropic way. And often she did sometimes, but often she didn't want to, because she just wanted to have that personal touch. She didn't want to just be anonymously giving to something. And after she died, all the relatives, the distant relatives of this family, came out of the woodwork and were there's a huge court battle for her fortune. And she had willed so much money to like her nurse and other assistants. And it really made you think about, who kind of deserves what. Her nurse was really the closest person to her, and ended up driving a Bentley, and her kids, education was paid for, and she was living large. And does that mean that she was exploiting this woman, or does that mean that the woman was generous with her and she accepted it? These relatives that came out of the woodwork, did they deserve some of the money because it was it was the family fortune, not Huguette's fortune individually? Or did they not deserve anything because they weren't even a part of her life? So why would they inherit something from her? It was good. It was, I'd give it 4 stars. I'm a big nonfiction reader. Oh, I forgot to introduce myself at the beginning. My name's Lydia, and I'm the assistant director at the library. I'm partial to nonfiction, and this was something I had never heard of before, and it was it was pretty fascinating, so I recommend it.
Thank you, Lydia. Do you have another title?
It was really good.
You read it, Carla?
Yes, yeah, I actually listened to it as well. Really enjoyed that.
Oh, you also listened to it, so that reminds me of something that was particularly interesting about the audiobook, was that the audiobook includes, and I had never experienced this before with an audiobook, it includes clips of her actually speaking, because the cousin, who was the co-author, he recorded some of their conversations. And so parts of the book that include these conversations, they actually play the audio, so you hear her voice. And even she lived to be 104, and she still had this French accent, even though she, the family was French, but she was raised she grew up in the United States, but she still had this really cute little frail French accent. So that was neat to have that as part of the audiobook experience.
I wonder if the actual book, did you actually take a look at the actual book, if it had photographs and stuff? Because that's what I always miss from the audio. But in this case, you wouldn't get the little, the little taped versions in the book. But
yeah, and sometimes I did end up going. I was curious about what the homes looked like and what she looked like, so I ended up kind of Googling and just looking at her and looking at the houses on Wikipedia and things like that to kind of see more. Because even sometimes on ebooks, they might include the pictures, but sometimes they're too small to see if you're reading it on your phone or something. So yeah, there are pros and cons to all of the different formats that we have.
Yeah.
And that's all I have. I've been kind of juggling a few other books, but my attention span is really weird during this strange time, so I keep kind of hopping around and haven't really finished any of the others. So
Okay, thank you, Lydia. Charlotte, how would you like to go next?
I would like to go mainly because I wanted to just talk a little bit more about which version you like. And Jerry and I listened to The Feather Thief, which I happened to write my column about, which was a fascinating book about the theft of some birds, dead birds, bird collection from the British Museum. And it was just absolutely fascinating, had so many interesting things that we both related to. Jerry ties flies, and it was, of course, that's what the feathers were used for. And we listened to it, and it was great to listen to, but I had to go get the book so that I could look at some of the pictures of the different birds, because they were all in the book. And it's just a fascinating book. I just loved it. But anyway, I actually, like Lydia, have had my attention span is just not there, and it's interesting because there are several of us on this discussion today who are true crime aficionados, and I have found that I'm just totally uninterested in true crime at this time, and I'm pretty uninterested in nonfiction. I've been trying to read some fiction, as a matter of fact, because we're inundated with so many articles, news articles, and various things that we need to be reading for our jobs right now. So, but Patty can take that down, and you might want to find the book that Such a Fun Age. It was actually up there on the Goodreads with Liz's book. It was one of the suggestions on the right. And I decided I wanted to try to, and you all know me I'm not a fiction reader at all, but I tend to be reading some fiction now. And this book has 597 holds on it. So I'm actually reading, listening to it on audio. And it's the book of this young Black woman who is a babysitter. She's actually needs to get a career before she's 26, because she's on her parents' insurance. And that's the magic age, of course, when you can no longer have health insurance. And she's doing some babysitting, and she's doing some typing and various other things. She's cobbling things together. And she's babysitting at night one night, and the woman who she babysits, a 2-year-old for, asks her to take her child because there's something going on at the house. And she takes the child to a little market in town around the corner, and she gets charged with kidnapping. She's a young Black woman who has been drinking, as a matter of fact, and gets called onto the job. And the little girl is white. And so it's sort of the story of white privilege and rich privilege, and being a Black young woman. It is not something as sad as Trayvon Martin or other things that have happened like that, but it is the story of how a young life can be turned all around by an incident like that. And then the other book I wanted to show that unfortunately only 2 libraries have in the catalog anymore because it's 50 years old. Whoops, it is backwards, isn't it?
No,
No,
that's correct.
no.
No, it's okay to you guys. It's not to me.
It's me.
The New York Times International Cookbook by Craig Claiborne came out in 1971. And I was a young woman getting married in 1973. And my mother was very, felt that I should learn to cook. And I I was like book of the month cookbooks selection. And what amazes me today is that I actually used this book as a young person. And I had a friend on Facebook who had a question about making stuffed cabbage. And I thought, oh, I used to make stuffed cabbage. It kind of shocks me that I did that long ago. And so I looked up the recipe and sent her the recipe so she could figure out how to keep the cabbage rolls together. And so it's kind of interesting that here 50 years later, I have the book on my shelf and I was able to go back to it. And I really highly recommend it. He also had a lot of non-international New York Times cookbooks. Craig Claiborne, he was, the big chef of the day. So for those of you who are cooking during this crisis, I'm going back to some of my cookbooks and I'm trying to, it's interesting that I'm interested in some of the things I made a long time ago because I think they're very comforting right now.
Definitely, it's comfort food time.
What are
Definitely.
your ratings for all of your books, Charlotte, for your 3 books? Your stars?
Well, Such a Fun Age is gonna have to be, I would give it a 4.5. It's a up and coming hot book. Obviously, the large print, the audio, the print, all of them are in high demand. I think it's contemporary fiction. So I would give that a 4.5. And this international cookbook, of course, I have to give a 5 because it's so near and dear to my heart. Although most people wouldn't be able to find it, I think, in a lot of library catalogs.
I really liked Such a Fun Age too, Charlotte.
What's that?
Oh, when you were talking about it, I was trying to find a way to interject, but I also really liked Such a Fun Age.
Okay. Yeah, tell us a little bit more about it then.
Oh, sure. Yeah, I was luckily I think I was one of yes.
Debut author in 2019.
And is it also an Oprah book club book?
I don't know. I haven't read that. Maybe that's why there are so many holds.
I think I saw the little sticker on it on the cover Patty showed. But yeah, I was luckily one of the first people to put a hold on it, so I was able to snag it when it first came out. And yeah, basically what Charlotte just said about the book, it's about this babysitter who is reported that she's kidnapping this white child when all she's doing is taking this child to the grocery store because if I'm remembering correctly, there was a rock thrown through the parents' window because the husband had made some racial joke on air because he was a newscaster. But I really liked it. I was recommending it to all my friends. I thought it was such a good portrayal of how microaggressions occur. There's some there are some instances of overt racism in the book, but what I really appreciated was how much the author showed how such small comments that we as privileged white people can make can really harm. And how the two of the characters, the boyfriend and then the mom, who they think they're these open-minded,
the mom of the 2-year-old.
Yes, I forget her name.
Allie. I think it's Allie.
Yeah, Allie, and then the babysitter's boyfriend, the one who ends up recording the whole incident at first, how they both think they're these very open-minded, not racist white people, but then as you read the book, you see through their actions, even what they think is them being progressive and open-minded, they're actually causing more harm than good. And I loved the character of the 2-year-old. I thought she was so precious. I thought she was such a funny 2-year-old, and I just loved it overall. I think I gave that one 5 stars.
And Charlotte, you gave the Feather Thief, that was also 5 stars for you?
Which one?
Feather Thief.
Oh, Feather Thief. Yeah, oh yeah, 5 stars. But those were in my nonfiction days.
Right. I'm just keeping track so that because we include that in our staff picks list that we'll put out.
And also, I want to give a plug for Ex Libris, which is the movie about, which is the documentary about, as you know, a lot of us are watching things on Canopy and Acorn and IndieFlix and a lot of, and Hoopla, a lot of our streaming services. And Ex Libris is a documentary about the New York Public Library. It's very in-depth, and it could kind of get a little cumbersome, but I think it's a wonderful testament to the public library, especially in New York City. It's amazing how many people visit the New York Public Library and what they're able to do there. And that is on Canopy.
Great, thank you. Liz, did you have a comment?
I just wanted to interject because Charlotte did call out one of the most popular books in Minuteman right now, Such a Fun Age. And I don't want that to sound daunting, like, oh, you're never going to get it, because we are purchasing extra ebook and audiobook copies right now. So if you go onto Overdrive and Libby and you put a hold on something, we're going in constantly, and as soon as we see new holds, purchasing more copies. So you actually have a really good chance of getting it pretty soon. So any ebook or audiobook, if I encourage you to put a hold on it so that we know to purchase more.
Thanks for that, Liz. That's very important because primarily that's how we're reading right now. If we don't have a great library collection at home, I think that's important. Thank you. Yeah. Dina, why don't you pick up where Charlotte left off?
Okie doke. Hi, my name is Dina. I work in the children's department, and I have 3 books today. So the first book that I wanted to talk about, I actually read it the other day. My friend recommended it to me. She said it was amazing, and I agreed with her. So the book is Wolf Hollow by Lauren Wolk, or Wolk, W-O-L-K.
Yay!
And did someone else read it too?
I loved it.
Yay! So this book is it's set in Pennsylvania during World War II, and it's about this girl, Annabelle, who she's like growing up in on this farm in kind of like rural Pennsylvania, and she is being bullied by this girl, Betty, although I'm not even sure like bullying is the right word. It's more like tormenting, because like Betty's kind of a very like dark person in terms of like what she does. So she's being like bullied by this girl, Betty, who ends up bullying like her little brothers and her best friend, it's like much more than that. Like it's not simple, just like I don't know, typical like grade school bullying, if that's a thing. Like I said, it's a lot like darker, like what she does. And Betty then kind of turns her attentions to this World War I veteran in their town, Toby, who he's kind of seen as like the town like oddball. Like he lives on like the outskirts of like town. People notice him because he has like this long beard. He always wears this long coat and has like he always carries 3 guns with him. And she kind of like Betty kind of turns the town against him because she's acting like he committed this crime that he actually that he committed this crime, which Annabelle believes he did not commit. And so the book follows Annabelle as she's trying to like clear his name. I gave this one 5 out of 5 stars. The prose was really, really good in it. It was a very, like the story, like the relationship between Annabelle and Toby, it was very lovely. I love one thing that Toby does is like that he kind of took her family's camera, because they have this like lifetime thing with Kodak where Kodak will just send them free rolls of film, and they also sent them a camera. And Toby at one point, he's like, oh, can I borrow this? And then he just takes photos with the camera, and then they develop the photos for him, and then they give it back to him. And he's like constantly taking pictures of like nature. And like that through that way, like Annabelle knows that like he's kind of watching out for her. So they had like a really sweet relationship. And it was just like a very like lovely story aside from like whatever Betty does. So yeah, I gave that one 5 out of 5 stars. Then my second book that I read was House of Earth and Blood by Sarah J. Maas. It's the first in her new Crescent City series.
Very curious to hear what you have to say, Dina. I've heard of some stuff about that one.
Oh, wait until you hear me and Kate's Do We Read It podcast, or Kate's podcast. We have a lot to say about it. So this book is set in, I think it's like an alternative version of New Orleans. It's called, it has a long name. Let me just go to the map. It's called Lunathion, and basically it's the city where like fairies and vampires and and werewolves and any kind of like mystical being that you can think of lives there, but in like a modern setting. So the story follows this girl, Bryce Quinlan, and she is half fae or half fairy. And yes, Lydia, it's House of Earth and Blood. And she's living in the city with her best friend Danica, who is the leader of a werewolf pack called like the Devils, I think. And she's just kind of like living like Bryce is very much a party girl. She loves going out with her like with her mystical friends to like these different clubs, and she loves partying. But then she has this like she has this tragedy occur in her life after coming home from a party one night where this isn't really a spoiler because it's mentioned in the summary, but her best friend Danica does end up being killed. And so the book then fast forwards 2 years into the future where these like the same murder that happened to Danica, it's starting to happen to other citizens of Lunathion. So Bryce is like assigned by the governor of Lunathion to work with this fallen angel, Hunt Athalar, to kind of go undercover and discover who is behind these murders. This one is, I don't know if I want to call it new adult or just adult. I think I'm leaning more towards adult. But it's like the first, it's like branded as Sarah J. Maas's first adult book. And for those of you who are not familiar with her work, she's more known for her YA series. She wrote the Court of Thorns and Roses series and the Thorn of Glass series, which are also fantasy YA series. And this book, I guess it's a bunch of different genres. Like when I try describing it, I think of it as like crime, thriller, high fantasy with lots of romance. So if you do not like romance, I would not recommend picking this up. But I ended up really liking it. The first 200 or so pages, it was kind of slow going for me, but Sarah J. Maas never fails to disappoint. And she, the way that she builds up the characters, and she's not afraid to have characters change relationships. Early on in the book, Bryce and her half brother, they butt heads constantly, and they're just I hate you because they had this argument. But towards the end of the book, but as the book goes on, you see them kind of repairing their relationship into more of a loving brother and sister relationship. And I just so yeah, I love how she's not afraid to change her characters or have them repair relationships and whatnot. So I would recommend, so if you feel the book is slow going at first, stick with it. I promise you it gets better. I gave this one, I think 4.5 stars. And then my final book, which I think Kate is reading as well, is We Ride Upon Sticks by Quan Barry. And this one is a new one that just came out. It's set in the town of Danvers in 1989, and it follows this girls field hockey team who they've kind of been known for their losing streak, but one night at field hockey camp, they like make a pact to, they refer to him as Emilio, because they like write down their like names in this notebook that has, I don't know, some like 80s actor name.
Oh my
like,
God, Dina,
Emilio.
can I cut in here? Do you not know who Emilio Estevez is?
I do. Once I looked it up, I was like, oh, I know who that is. I just can't remember the last name.
Oh gosh.
He's Charlie Sheen's brother.
Yeah.
Okay. Oh
I
my
did
God,
look
that was
this
so
up.
good.
I'm like, I can't remember the last name.
Poor Dina. Kind.
Oh, Dina.
But yeah, what was his last name
Generational.
again?
What's that? Emilio Estevez?
Yes.
He's Martin Sheen's son, Charlie Sheen's brother.
Yeah.
He's in the
They're
Mighty
like an acting
Ducks.
family.
That was
Animals
it.
Fire.
That was it. Now I remember he was in Breakfast Club.
Yes.
I was like, when I saw his face, I was like, okay, I know who that is, but I just couldn't remember the last name. But yeah, they refer to this being as Emilio, because Emilio Estevez is like on the cover of the notebook that they're like writing their names in. So basically they kind of like make a pact to this like dark being so that their team will start to win. And since it's set in Danvers, which was the original site of the Salem witch trials, like the book is kind of like a 1980s version of the Salem witch trials. Like some of the characters' names, they are like a parody of like some of the more famous victims of the Salem witch trials. Like there's one character named Abby Putnam. There's a boy Corey and a girl Corey, so like Giles Corey. And so far, I'm like halfway through it, but so far I'm really liking it. I love anything 80s, and this book is chock full of 80s references. The characters are also like really fun. There's one girl who, her name's like Jen Fiorenza, and the way she like does her bangs and that like hair sprayed poof, all of her friends refer to it as the claw. And
so funny.
Yeah,
I could show you a good picture if you need a reference.
Yeah.
Sure I have.
please do. And yeah, so far I'm really liking it. It reminds me a lot of this other book that I read called My Best Friend's Exorcism, which was also set in the 80s, and also was like horror, but had like lots of like 80s references, and the writing was also really fun. So yeah, so far I'm really liking this, and can't wait to hear more from Kate when she talks about it as well.
Yeah, thanks, Dina. Okay, so now we'll segue to Kate Tighe.
Hello, I'm Kate Tighe. I am the children's librarian. I also work in the children's room with Dina. And Dina and I have very similar reading tastes. So we've read a lot of the same things. Dina ends up recommending a lot of books to me, or she ends up looking at my Goodreads and saying she wants to read similar things that I've read. So I also was reading We Ride Upon Sticks, and I put it in my do not finish pile. So I feel like maybe I should persevere. I just felt like, Dina, I just felt like I was reading and reading and reading and reading. And I was like, oh, let me see how far I am, because I am actually reading most of my books on my Kindle. And so I don't have mine set to page numbers. I have it to set to what percentage of the book I finished. And so I looked down and I felt like I had been reading this book forever. And I am not a slow reader. It was like 31% done. And I'm like, are you kidding me? We are only on 31%. I feel like I have been reading about Jen and the Claw forever. Like I just can't keep going with this right now. I did put it down. I feel like it's supposed to be suspenseful, but maybe it's not as suspenseful as it wants to be. And I will admit, and maybe this is because I'm not from Massachusetts originally, I knew it took place in Danvers, and I knew it took, the Salem witch trials. I don't really know that much about the Salem witch trials because it wasn't like a thing where I grew up. So I did not get any of those references that Dina pointed out. So I am very pleased that Dina pointed it out. Maybe that will reignite my interest in this book. Yeah, I don't know a ton about it.
That's like my one of my historical niche interests is
Okay,
like the
so
Salem
you're
witch
familiar.
trials. Yeah, and when I was in high school, I was in a production of The Crucible. So all of those facts are just like ingrained in my brain.
Yeah,
I'll never forget the "Where'd you go, Bernadette" discussion.
Oh my god!
Oh my! Where we had somebody who gave it a 5 and somebody who who gave it a
Yeah.
0.
Yeah, that was me. I gave it a
Yeah.
5, and then Jeff, who used to work for us, hated it so much. Like, he just
I
couldn't
hate
stand it. So yeah, I loved Where'd You Go, Bernadette. But anyway,
But
yeah. So,
Marge and April had opposite ratings for that as well.
oh, did they really?
Hmm.
Caused a schism.
Yeah.
Boy.
Yes.
So yeah, so maybe I will be encouraged to, maybe I'll do a little reading, a little background reading. I just feel like I'm forgetting about the Salem witch trial thing. I just feel like the suspense wasn't as like, it didn't pull me in as much. Cause I'm just like, oh, okay, Emilio, and the goalie has the weird thing on her neck.
Oh, the splotch.
Like, yeah, they all think
They
it's
call it
hickey, but
it.
it's not. Yeah. You know, she's like feeding some dark being with her blood. But yeah, even all that was just not enough. So I will go back to it once I finish the book I'm reading for Quarantine Book Chat, which is our teen book chat group. We're reading a book called Sisters of the Sword, which is very good. It is like a middle grade novel about 2 sisters during the samurai period in Japan. And that's been very involving. But I did read another book about field hockey, which is weird because I feel like I am like a non-high school. I was not a high school athlete at all.
Me either.
I'm super suspect of like the team mentality thing. Like, that's not for me. And I just like, that doesn't draw me in. And I always thought adults who were super involved in like kids sports were, you know, like a little too involved. No, not for me. And so I've read 2 books about high school field hockey, which is weird. So I've also read We Are the Wildcats, which is a book about a group of girls who discover that their coach is manipulating them horribly. He's probably like maybe in his late 20s, early 30s, and they don't ever name him. He doesn't have a name in the book. He's just called Coach. And the girls on his team absolutely worship him. First of all, they think he's super attractive. And he's just kind of like that farther. He's like just a little bit older than them to seem attractive and mysterious without it being like super creepy. Although as adults, we know that is super creepy. So anyways, but they do like all these crazy things that he says. And they have this team ritual every year where the seniors host like kind of like a pep rally at their house for the team. And they have like a big sleepover, and like the captains are announced, and they give out all the jerseys to everybody, and it's like this whole thing. And so the main character, Mel, has this all planned, and her plans end up sort of going haywire. And they end up doing all these other things, and they end up going back to the school and breaking into the school, and they end up stealing like the other team's mascot, which is a dog, like an actual dog, because they think this is something. They're just really on this like quest to try and please their coach, and the way that they think they're going to do that is by doing these like more and more outlandish things that he doesn't really direct them to do, but he kind of like eggs them on. But in doing that, they do discover that he has been manipulating them this whole time, and actually a couple of the girls end up losing out on fairly significant scholarships to college, which is really, really sad. I would say that the book is I would give it, I don't know, I think I would give it like 3 stars. I think I did give it 3 stars on Goodreads. It was really good. It was very involving, but it was probably a little too adult, and like it was a little too predictable. Like if you are an adult, you could absolutely see what was going to happen. That these girls were slowly going to realize this guy was taking advantage of their naivete to manipulate them for his own purposes. And the whole reason he was manipulating them is because he was trying to score a better job himself somewhere else. And he was sort of using them to do that. But yeah, it was good. I think I might be done with my sports like run right now. I think that was good for me. That's about the limit of my team understanding.
Kate, is that a
Yeah.
graphic novel? From the cover, it looks like it's a graphic novel.
It's not. It's a straight fiction book.
Okay.
Nope. It was very fast paced. I think I liked the pace of it, as opposed to the We Ride Upon Sticks by Quan Berry. It's very fast paced. I feel like the Quan Berry book is more of a slow burn. So I'll have to go back to that.
Kate, her name's
So
Siobhan. Is it an American book, or is it written by an Irish author, or do you know?
No, it's American. It takes place in America. You know, pretty typical. But yeah, I mean, it was good, but it was just, yeah, I think I might just be at my limit of understanding high school sports. So
Dina, how many stars did you give We Read on Sticks?
I have not finished it yet, so I'll have to like hold off on stars for now.
So, and you didn't give it, so we're not rating We Read on Sticks yet.
I'll give you a rating next month.
Okay.
Okay. All right, thank you, Kate. I'm going to slide right over on my screen to Nancy Ling.
Hello, hello.
Hello.
So Nancy Ling is from Outreach, but not outreaching too much right now. So I gathered some books from my bookshelf, but most of them are also available.
You are outreaching. This is
I'm outreaching, that's right. Just in different ways, So my first one, I had mentioned this, we had the poetry swap session the other night, and it's Billy Collins' Question About Angels. And it's his poetry is always so fun, usually light in some ways. And for example, his main poem, which is Question About Angels, starts with, of all the questions you might ask about angels, the only one you ever hear is how many can dance on the head of a pin. And then he goes on to say how many other questions you might want to have about angels. And they are much deeper than the head of the pin question. So I really like that one. I would give it a 5. It was nice to be brought back to poetry, which I haven't done for a little bit now. And I've also turned to picture books. So this is sort of what my library column is about this month, how we're finding words in different places that are kind of reassuring to us. And so I find picture books pretty reassuring at this moment in time. So this one is I Am Human. The illustrations are Peter Reynolds, who lives down the street in Dedham, and Susan Verde is the author. And it's a book of empathy. So I thought we all needed a little empathy for each other right now. And it's just really sweet about how we do so many things that are, even if we're very different, how we do so many things that are similar, and we should keep that in mind, certainly when we're under stress. You know, it says, I can treat others with equality and be fair. A bad day can become a great day with kindness. I just thought that was really sweet. So good reminder at this time. This I would give a 5 as well. I have all 5s. And then the last one that I have is by Josh Funk, Lost in the Library. So I figure, well, we're all out of the library, perhaps Patience and Fortitude, the lions outside of the New York Public Library, might be busy. And basically, Patience is missing one night, and Fortitude is wondering where Patience goes. And I think I have that right. No, it's the reverse. No, that's right. So Fortitude goes looking for poor Patience, and he's in the library and can't find where his fellow lion went. So it's a bit of a mystery too, in terms of you want to figure out what happened to the other lion. So I highly recommend Josh's book, told through rhymes. And yeah, that's all for me, I guess, for this month.
Did you say rhymes? Did you say rhymes?
His story is told in a rhyming.
Oh, that's my favorite.
Yeah.
Way for
fashion. Yes, it's fun. It's fun.
Okay, thanks, Nancy.
You're welcome.
Carla.
Me?
Yes.
Oh, hello, I'm Carla Howard. I work in media and marketing and circulation. And I'm kind of on the same page as you guys are talking about comfort food and comfort words and whatnot. I'm reading my comfort books or stories, which are Agatha Christie, because that brings me back and I enjoy it. I found this one collection, it's called The Collection, on Kindle edition. And there's 28 stories, and they have Hercule Poirot and his sidekick Hastings, which if anybody reads these, they know that he's like Watson. and they're all, they're all very good. They're, they're wonderful. And I've also been watching some of the series on Acorn that are related to these stories, some of these stories. So it's been pretty interesting, been very Agatha Christie for me in this house, and that's fine. I really, of course, enjoy all of her writing. She's, probably one of my favorites, definitely one of my favorites. And I would give it 5 stars for the writing content. But the thing is with the electronic versions or the Kindle editions, sometimes you get, and it really is a pet peeve, misspellings and punctuation mistakes. So I'd have to bring it down to a 4 just for that, because it's distracting to me. And but it was only $1.99 for 28 titles. So it's, if you're looking for something to read, if you've never read her, it's got a really good selection of what she does. And I would highly recommend it.
Thank you. Is that all you have for us today, Carla?
Yeah, there's 3 novels and like 25 stories in there. So it's
oh, wow. Okay, great. Thank you.
Sure.
Nicole D.
Hi. So I'm Nicole, and I work in circulation at the front desk. And the one book I read, I just finished, it's called The Playground by Jane Shemlet. And it's very much like Big Little Lies, where it's 3 different families, and they come together. They're all being tutored by this one woman who has like this idyllic farmland where her children run around and are in the bushes and playing with the horses, and everything's magical. And these 3 families kind of come together, and they spend a summer in Greece at their house, and they everyone's getting along. But what's happening is no one's paying attention to the kids that are in the bushes and in the little eaves, and they're becoming mischievous, and the parents are having their own issues of affairs and different dynamics going on between the marriages and things like that. So it's kind of, you're not paying attention to what the kids are doing. You're more focused on the parents, and then it switches over, and then you're like, wait a minute, what are the kids doing? And and if you don't, there's a little bit of like someone gets hurt. So if you're not into kids getting hurt, you may not want to. It's very small in the story, but it is significant. But it's really like, it's kind of like a good mystery, like what's going on, and you kind of realize that sometimes parents, maybe you get caught up in your own stuff and you're not paying attention to the kids. And I just thought it was a really good book. But it's definitely like a Big Little Lies kind of feel if you've ever read that. But I'd give it like 4.5 stars. And then the other book I'm reading, it's The Home Edit by Clea Scherer and Joanna Teplin. And it's an organizational book. It gives you ideas of how to like take your pantry out and then just reorganize it, your drawers. It's kind of like Marie Kondo, but a little bit more fun and more realistic if you have children. Like I've done my cabinets with this, my kitchen cabinets. I've done my linen closet. But it's a fun, like they're really lighthearted, and they're really much into champagne and, rewarding yourself at the end of the day with a glass of champagne or candy or whatever your vice is. But it's a fun book. And I give that one 4 stars too.
Very nice. Thank you, Nicole. Yeah. And I guess we'll wrap up with my 2 book selections. The first book that I want to talk about was a fun book. I have found that I need sort of an escape with all that's going on right now. And I really, really enjoyed it. The title of the book, which I will share, it's called The City Baker's Guide to Country Living. And it starts out in Boston. This woman, her name's Olivia, and she's a famous pastry chef in Boston, and she has a very interesting life. She lives in a very small apartment. pretty much her job at this private club as the chef, pastry chef, is her life. However, she does have an affair with a married man that is one of the very wealthy members of this elite club. And during his birthday party at the club, she's supposed to be presenting this wonderful flaming dessert, birthday ambrosia or baked Alaska or whatever it was supposed to be. And she kind of missteps, and when she does, the curtains in the restaurant part of the club just ignite, and before you know it, the whole place is just engulfed in flames and burns down. So she figures it's time to get out of Dodge, and figures she's lost her job, she's made the laughing stock. So she escapes up to Vermont to visit one of her friends. And while she's there, she decides that she's gonna hang with her friend for a little bit, but then she kind of gets a feel for the life up there, the slower pace. And there's an inn up there that they're looking for a pastry chef. It's a bed and breakfast. And she thought, well, you know what, maybe I'll look into this. So she winds up interviewing with the owner of the inn, realizing that she's been probably the 5th pastry chef in less than a year, because the turnover's been great, because the owner is not the easiest person to get along with. But she kind of finds a way to befriend her, and she really decides that she loves the life up there. And there's a little bit of a love story going on, and the author, Louise Miller, is a pastry chef. So she's describing her creations, and they're truly just wonderful. And you do, your appetite does build as you're reading the book. However, it is a feel-good book. It's funny. The characters are very likable, and I would just recommend it for another, just an enjoyable fiction read. She has written a few other books, which I think I would like to delve into those too, just because I just really like her writing, and just really enjoying this type of read. The other book that I
That
had
was
read,
how many stars?
I would give that a 4.5. The other book that I read was based on a Hulu series, and there's been a documentary, and it's a fictionalized version of a story of Munchausen syndrome by proxy. The title of that book is called Darling Rose Gold, which I will pull that up just so you can see the cover. This book is a debut. This is debut author, and I think because currently there is this series out on Hulu called The Act, and there's also been another sort of a docu-movie done about this really did happen, about this girl that wound up going to prison for murdering her mother, because the mother had a lot of issues and wound up convincing her daughter that she was very ill when she really wasn't. And it took many years for the daughter to realize that she was a victim of her mother's mental illness. So this Darling Rose Gold is kind of a spin-off of this real story, only it takes a few different twists and turns. So it is difficult in spots, even though it's a fiction book, to read some of the things that were done to this poor girl. But it's really a thriller too. And this I would also give a 4.5 to. I thought the writing was really good. And it's, you know, and if you are interested in that type of a story, it is very realistic as to what the Munchausen syndrome by proxy is. So it is pretty intense, but it is a good read. And this was something that I read prior to all of the pandemic, and I don't know if I would have enjoyed it as much right now, because I think right now it's better to read something a little lighter, something a little more pleasurable, which leads me to plugging my book groups that I'm running virtually right now.
I was going to suggest that you plug your next month's book.
Yes. So there are two different book groups that we're running. My monthly book group that now is virtual, which is called Turn the Page, which that will be on Wednesday evening, May 20th at 6:30 p.m. The book we are reading is called The Readers of Broken Wheel Recommend by Katerina Brevald. And this book, as well as the other book that for the other book group, are both available through Hoopla, so you do not have to wait, the ebooks. And this one is available audio as well. It's about a pen pal situation between a woman in Sweden and a woman in America. And the woman in Sweden, they exchange books in the mail. The woman in Sweden goes to visit her pen pal in America, only to find out she has passed away. And it's about her settling into this small town and starting a book group. And I haven't gotten to as far into it, so I don't want to give anything away, but it's very enjoyable, and I think it's going to be a great read and a great discussion. On our website, we have a link if you want to register, and you'll receive the Zoom link, as well as there's discussion questions. And the newest book group that we're doing virtually is called All Booked Up. And that one will be on Monday evening, which is going to be May 11th at 6:30 p.m. And that book we're reading, which I am thoroughly enjoying, it's called Miss Bunkle's Book. It was a book originally written in 1935 by a Scottish author named D.L. Stevenson. And it takes place in a little English village. And it's about this single woman that once writes a book about her village. And she writes it under an assumed name, a male. And she winds up, the book gets published, and the town isn't too happy with her. But it's very enjoyable. It's part of a trilogy. And again, this is an ebook as well. And I think it's just a fun, light, interesting read. And I think that, again, this is the time to just read books that are enjoyable to all of us. We are also, one other discussion that we're having, which is a few times a month, and it's called All Booked Up. And that is what we're doing right now, a book discussion. The next one will
Not
be—
All Booked Up, Together Apart, right?
Sorry, thank you. Together Apart. And I'm looking on my calendar. we do have another one scheduled for May 6th, so next Wednesday, we have that scheduled. And that anyone can join regardless of what book you want to talk about. It could be a cookbook, it could be a biography, it could be a children's book, whatever you'd like. And you're more than welcome to join us. There are details on our website, and you can be part of a great discussion. We share great ideas. People that are fiction readers found a nonfiction that really fits the bill, and vice versa. As you see, there's several nonfiction people here today that are looking to fiction right now to escape. So we have so much information on our website that we could, to share with you. Liz, what would you like to add?
I'm not sure how many times this recording is going to run on NCM, but just in case it does run again later in the month, that Together Apart book chat will be meeting again on Wednesday, May 27th. So if you missed the first one, catch us again at the end of the month and join in to give book recommendations.
Thank you for that. So please visit our website, norwoodlibrary.org. There's a lot of online resources that you can access right now. And we're here for you. We have online ref chat if you have any questions, if you need any assistance with getting a library card, that's available online. And I'd like to thank all of my colleagues for participating in our first Zoom staff book discussion. That hopefully you folks in the audience have enjoyed it, and we hope to do it again. So on behalf of everyone at Moore Memorial Library, we miss you. We're looking forward to seeing you again, and please enjoy the time reading and streaming video and take advantage of all the wonderful free services we have to offer the community. Bye, everyone. Thank you.